Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 115, recording on Monday, September 22nd, the morning after the Vikings mauled the Bengals Sunday at US Bank Stadium. Holy cow, that was not close. Very impressive Vikings performance, and we're going to talk about all of it. We're going to get into Isaiah Rodgers. We'll give you my eval of Carson Wentz via the film. Give you the most underrated player, in my opinion, in that game from a Vikings standpoint, and then a bunch of other just more in the weeds thoughts based on film study, talking to people, advanced metrics, and stuff like that. If you're new here watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Helps us out a ton. We are here 2 times a week giving you as in the weeds Vikings thoughts, comments, analysis, as we possibly can, so appreciate that. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast, please rate, review, follow us. All of that stuff really, really helps us out. This show is presented by First Resource Bank. If you don't know about it, they are a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area with branches all over the place, run by Vikings fans. Their online banking platform makes it very easy to use, especially if you're someone like me about to go overseas. You need to, shuffle around some funds and figure out your life as you embark on a trip to Dublin and London per se. First Resource can help you out with that. And the show is also sponsored by Unreal. If you don't know about it, it is a locally based clothing company. I'm wearing it right now. They have limited edition drops and hoodies before most of these Vikings weekends. There's another one, a UK edition hoodie, dropping Tuesday at 11 CT. It's got a limited edition patch, a European kind of UK theme. It's woven. There's a, football clubbish kind of aspect to it. So please, you can find the wait list and figure out your way to grab one of these limited edition hoodies. They're exceptional, as high quality as you're going to find. So Unreal, the link to them will also be in the description below. Let's get right into it and begin with Isaiah Rodgers, who had an all-time defensive performance. You guys have probably heard that by now, but when you score 2 defensive touchdowns and force 2 fumbles in one half, which had never been done in a game, but you do it in a half, and mostly all in the second quarter, it's going to go down in history as just one of the more special defensive showcases of all time. You guys probably wonder, like, Alec, there's no way you would have expected this. And the answer quickly would be no. No chance that I thought Isaiah Rodgers would do something in week 3 that had never been done before in the history of the NFL. No chance. But if you've listened to this podcast and you've read my writing now going back to the spring and back to April when the Vikings signed this guy, I have been on the record plenty of times, which is great to say now in hindsight. I mean, you seem really smart in my position after a game like that, but I've been on the record saying that the Vikings really, really believed in what this guy would be capable of for their defense. It was why he was the first offseason signing that the Vikings made. And you guys at the time were probably like, who the heck is this guy and why are we not fortifying the trenches, which the Vikings obviously ended up doing over the course of that free agency week. But Isaiah Rodgers was the first signing. It was like a 2-year, $15 million deal with $8 million of that guaranteed really for one season. And the thought, really was, if the Vikings were going to spend on the trenches offensively and defensively the way that they wanted to, they were going to have to find a lower cost corner signing to pair with Byron Murphy Jr., they were also going to pay a boatload of money, who could outperform the contract that the Vikings were willing to offer. And Isaiah Rodgers was a guy who Brian Flores has had his eye on since he came out of college playing at UMass years and years ago. Like at the time he came out, Brian Flores was the head coach of Miami, and you best believe Brian Flores, who was a former scout in the New England Patriots building, has had his eyes on this guy for a long time. After the game, it was hilarious. You're bouncing around the locker room talking to Harrison Smith, who I wrote this, was genuinely blown away by what he saw Isaiah Rodgers accomplish. And Harrison, you guys know if you watch the podcast with him, he is understated, He shrugs off most everything. He's seen about everything one can see through 14 years. And he was, you could tell the amount of just the impression that the Isaiah Rodgers performance made on him. And then I bounced over in the locker room to Dwight McGlothern, the young cornerback who was always good for a fun quote. And he's like, man, I felt like I was in a dream watching my creative player in Madden. And then you go to Josh Metellus, and Josh was saying that in the showers after the game, a bunch of the secondary were in there, and they're like, should we start punching the ball out? Like, are footballs being dislodged easier now than ever before? And that was really their way, the secondary members' way of trying to put in perspective seeing Isaiah Rodgers do what he's done. I will tell you this, and I think I've said this on the podcast, but when Brian Flores has his eye on a player the way he had his eye on Isaiah Rodgers before free agency, it typically works out. I mean, Andrew Van Ginkel was one of them. Brian Flores in that instance obviously had experience and crossover with Andrew Van Ginkel in Miami. He'd watched him develop, so he, above all, probably knew what that guy was capable of. But another player who ended up not signing with the Vikings, who Brian Flores really wanted here, was Zach Bond, who has become a stalwart player of the Philadelphia Eagles defense and was a critical piece to what Vic Fangio and that unit accomplished last year on their way to a Super Bowl. The Vikings obviously weren't able to make that happen, and Zach Bond ended up signing with Philadelphia, and the Vikings made it work out because they found Blake Cashman, who was another, player who Brian Flores really liked and really wanted. And again, it worked out for the Vikings in that regard. But Isaiah Rodgers was in this mold where Brian Flores, who is never one to shy away from offering his opinion on what he wants or believes or sees his, envisions with what his defense can ultimately accomplish, Isaiah Rodgers fit that bill. And you saw it in training camp. He showed the speed that he has, which is on an entirely different level. The ball skills are apparent. He's confident the way you want a cornerback to be. And he has like the zone and man capability. And that's, for years now, we've talked about this Brian Flores defense. And on the outside, it's like, man, they're probably going to want to get back more to the to the man coverage tendency that Brian Flores showed in his time in Miami. But that's not really the path that they've wanted to take as a defensive staff. Like this era of the NFL is not what it was when Brian Flores was playing 50% man in 2019. They want to have a defense that is so multiple from a coverage standpoint that it gives quarterbacks, immense problems. And you saw kind of some of that version on Sunday where they're playing man coverage, then they're playing cover two, and they're playing quarters, and they're playing quarters on one side and cover two on the other side, and they're playing cover three. They can mix it with the best of them. And I'm going to talk more about this in a little bit, but that takes, design from a schematic standpoint and a trust fall from the coaching staff to believe that the players can accomplish it. But it also takes a group of players that have the ability to, understand, apply, and be nimble enough from a week-to-week standpoint mentally for that type of scheme to work. And Isaiah Rodgers has fit into this group where he, again, not only does he have the physical traits and the speed and the instinctiveness and the ball skills, but from an ability to handle everything that the Vikings staff throws at these guys defensively so that they can execute optimally on the field. Like Isaiah Rodgers has that in spades. So to see him have that day, it was unbelievable. It was hard to understand. The forced fumble that Isaiah Rodgers had on the sideline where he picked it up himself and ran it back, I didn't even see the ball fall on the ground, and it felt like sleight of hand, like a pickpocket in football version, and was just pretty amazing to watch. But there is a reason the Vikings staff has been as defiant about their belief in the cornerback group as they've been going back to the beginning of the spring. You give them credit when you see a performance like that. And obviously the pass rush and how quickly they got to Jake Browning and from the angles at which they were getting to him, they help, obviously, in ratcheting up the anxiety for the opposing offense. And that showed in almost every respect. The most underrated player in the game for the Vikings on Sunday, if you guys ask me that, like, Alec, who's the guy that we didn't talk enough about or that you didn't really notice, but on film and talking to people you really were impressed by? The answer I'd give you is Theo Jackson. And he was, it borders on a similar conversation, but how many times, I'll just ask you guys, how many times on Sunday can you remember sitting on your couch or being in that US Bank Stadium and thinking like, man, we got beat over the top of our head? Didn't happen. How many times you're like, man, there are a ton of missed tackles or missed run fits up front? Didn't really happen. Theo Jackson has stepped in the way that this staff believed he could, which is why they didn't draft a safety in the first round, and it's why they didn't target another safety via free agency. They felt like this guy could step in Cam Bynum's absence and be a critical, reliable, trustworthy, every down player. And that's what he's been through 3 weeks. And he's not like the most vocal guy. He's not, out there celebrating like crazy, but it's just, he is the ultimate just do your job mentality. You don't really notice him unless you're really looking for him. And when you're not noticing a guy who really hasn't been in an every down role over the course of his career, speaks pretty highly about what he's capable of. The other aspect of Theo Jackson that is worth mentioning is to execute the level of disguise on the back end that this Vikings defense is executing. You have to have the safeties communicating with the second level. You have to have the safeties communicating with the cornerbacks, and you have to have the safeties being willing to know what the final call is to then, be roaming around like an amoeba until the snap happens, with precision. And Harrison Smith, who was back and had a hell of a game in his first game back from the personal health matter, like he obviously, he's capable of executing with precision. Josh Metellus has proved over the last couple of years that he is at, it rises to that standard as well. But to see Theo Jackson do it through 3 weeks, really, but definitely in this week 3 performance, it should be noted, it should be highlighted, and it should give, both the Vikings staff and Vikings fans in general a lot of confidence if you now have the level of belief in that, back in to be as dialed in as they were and as they've been. That is a very encouraging sign, especially with, again, what the front is doing right now. I'll segue to Carson Wentz in the offensive performance a little bit. I thought in real time Carson Wentz was solid. Like that was the evaluation type of tagline that I'd put on it. And then going back through the film, it felt like that was just a validation of that word, solid. I didn't think he was perfect. There are a couple plays in mind. A couple of the third downs early on. There was one where the Bengals defense showed kind of a one high defensive picture and then floated into a Tampa 2 look. Carson, it looked like he was a little affected by it. Now, how much was the offensive design geared toward one high? And so, like, he was always probably going to look a little flustered. And then there was another third and long situation where Carson Wentz looked like he was seeing too high, and it was actually one high man coverage, and he looked a little flustered. There was the red zone throw over the middle to Jalen Nailor that was a little behind Jalen Nailor. So, again, didn't think it was like, flawless and just A1 quarterback play. But would you expect that from a guy who hasn't started in a meaningful game in a long time? No. And was it crisp enough? Absolutely. Like, if anything, Carson Wentz's performance on Sunday was indicative, I think, of like the level of quarterback play this Vikings team needs with the talent around the quarterback. When you're able to run the ball like Jordan Mason was able to, when you have Christian Darrisaw protecting at left tackle, when your offensive plan is as on the screws as it seemed to be Sunday. All you need is the guy to hit accurately over the middle more often than not, and then, limit some of the pre-snap penalties. Where I still felt like there was probably more, or I know there was more than the Vikings staff wanted, but for his first game, it was solid. One interesting statistic / nugget from the Carson Wentz performance, he completed quick passes, which is a pass in less than 2.5 seconds on 60% of his attempts on Sunday. That's a pretty high number. J.J. McCarthy in the 2 games prior had only hit on quick passes 17.1%. For me, that number is a little bit of a reflection of the game plan. I definitely thought there was a intentionality behind wanting Carson Wentz to get the ball out quicker. There were some receiver screens. There was a slant to Justin Jefferson that was incomplete, but even that one counted. Just felt like there was a targeted strategy of trying to get the ball out quicker, and Carson Wentz was able to do that. Again, when you got Christian Darrisaw back at left tackle, it provides an extra level of comfort. The Vikings plan, which I'm going to talk even more about, felt like they did a lot to chip Trey Hendrickson, even with Christian Darrisaw in, whether it was Josh Oliver, TJ Hockenson, Jordan Mason. Like, the Vikings were not going to allow the offense to get torpedoed by Trey Hendrickson on Sunday. And so that's a very sound approach to take. And I'd also say you can't evaluate Carson Wentz's performance without being very honest and open about what the Bengals defense is. And it is a unit, I wrote this, I've said this, that reminds me of Ed Donatel. There's just a lot of space. The personnel leaves a lot to be desired on the front and the back end. And so if you're the coordinator of that unit, Al Golden, who comes from Notre Dame, there's just really only so much you can do. I think that's partially why, like, Lou Anarumo, who was the Bengals' former defensive coordinator, was a hot name on the head coaching cycle for years. And then the Bengals lost a ton of their elite talent, be it Jesse Bates, be it Jermaine Pratt at linebacker, be it Mike Hilton, the slot corner. And once they lost a lot of that talent, Lou Anarumo, who was thought of very highly as a defensive coordinator, had a hard time making chicken salad, to be quite frank. And so now you see Al Golden having trouble with that personnel. And then in Indianapolis, where Lou Anarumo is, where that defense has some more personnel, especially on the front with DeForest Buckner and Latu and a bunch of those guys, that defense has looked better. It's for me, it's so much of the reflection of, you go back and forth on Jimmys and Joes and X's and O's, and it all matters. But you can't have a crisp level of X's and O's like the Vikings do with Brian Flores if you don't have the players to be able to execute that. And so, as I watched the Carson Wentz performance, in some ways I was thinking in my head, like, man, would it have been nice for J.J. McCarthy to get to go up against that defense and build some confidence. So just a thought that I had. We'll get a quick word from the sponsor here. Then I've got a bunch more nuggets to unveil, toss out once we come back from this quick break.
She's Jen, the ultimate Vikings fan.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Vikings Jan Show Fan Show. My special guest today is Jared Allen. So, Jared, who you got for the Vikings game this week?
Minnesota Vikings.
Me too. So that's our show. We'd like to thank our sponsor, the Minnesota Lottery, who reminds you this could be your year. Play the new
Vikings
Scratch Game for a shot at $100,000, game tickets, and more. Minnesota Lottery. I'm in. Must be 18 or older to play.
All right, I mentioned the offensive design, but I mean, just a great example of this, and you guys might remember this, the first touchdown to Josh Oliver, where it was Carson Wentz, quick drop back, finds Josh Oliver, touchdown. But the design element of a touchdown like that just cannot be lost. So what the Vikings did, you go back and look at it on the film, is they have Adam Thielen in the backfield at running back next to Carson Wentz in the shotgun. And I remember watching it live Sunday from the press box. I'm like, why is Adam Thielen in the backfield at running back? And you can see it's so strategic and purposeful, which you credit Kevin O'Connell and Wes Phillips and the Vikings offensive staff, Brian Angelico, with the design. Adam Thielen goes from his spot at running back in shotgun, quick to the flat. And you have multiple Bengals defenders their eyes are just all over Adam Thielen. Like, oh, if Adam Thielen's running that way from the backfield, the ball's definitely going to him. So Carson Wentz sets up with his eyes looking at Adam Thielen. The whole Bengals defense floats that way, and then Josh Oliver is wide open in that void for Carson Wentz to score that touchdown. That's just exceptional architecture offensively that leads to that touchdown to kind of get things going the way that it did. So I thought that was very good. Very, just that's what you want to see from this Kevin O'Connell offense. And that's what we've become accustomed to, where so much of what they do is, has a reason, has a purpose. And that was a great example of that for me. I mentioned this just to reiterate it. Like, there was chip help with Trey Hendrickson all day, whether it was TJ Hockenson, Josh Oliver, or Jordan Mason. And that, as you're easing Christian Darrisaw back, as great of a player as Christian is, and we were all reminded of that in bold and italics form on Sunday, but to just offer him some help as he's, finding his way back, it's great to see. And it's an offensive staff not losing sight of, what's going to be critical to win the game. Some of the red zone runnings, and Jordan Mason had 2 red zone touchdown runs. I thought Donovan Jackson was great in double teams. There was one where he connects with Michael Juergens on a double team and then breaks up and seals the linebacker for a Jordan Mason run, 5-yard touchdown run. So just thought in a lot of respects. I will say, going back through the film, like, man, if you plug Ryan Kelly back into this thing, and that even makes it harder for opposing defenses to do what they want to do from a stunt standpoint on the front, you can just diffuse that stuff and have even more of a vertical push in the run game with Jordan Mason, who just creates extra yards behind them. I mean, like, you could see, and then you add in Jordan Addison, to where defenses have even a harder time playing man coverage and have to play with 2 deep safeties, so there's more space to run the football. Like, that's where you could start to see the picture that this Vikings personnel staff, front office, coaching, that's like the picture and the ultimate vision of what they had as they went through the entire offseason. Now, how often will we get to see that? From a health standpoint, we'll see. But if they can get to that place where you have all the pieces that you originally on paper were going to have, it gets pretty dangerous. I do want to say quickly on Jordan Mason. I mean, I've banged the drum from the time they acquired this guy that it just felt like such a great move. But just some numbers for you. Among the 25 qualified running backs right now, he's first in EPA per rush, first in success rate, 5th in yards per carry at 5.3 a carry, 7th in yards after contact per carry, 2nd in rushing yards over expected. Like, and on film, you just see it. Every time there is a possibility for him to get more than it really looks like he should get, he does find a way to do it, whether it's making a 1-yarder become 3-yarders, whether it's making a 4-yarder become a 9-yarder. The more the Vikings lean into this guy, it just feels like the better this offense is going to be. And this was kind of as things were being put together in the spring and over the summer, it felt like the front 7 and the run game was going to be, I've said it a million times, I've said it the same way, like the scaffolding of this team. And that game in week 3 was the first time really where you felt like the plan showed itself in action on Sunday. Few more things, and then we'll let you get out of here as you plan for your European trip or get back to workout or whatever you got going on. But Javon Hargrave exited the game pretty early on with the chest/rib injury. We'll get the update from Kevin O'Connell on kind of his status as this overseas trip looms. But in his absence, thought Levi Drake Rodriguez and Jalen Redmond were the types of players that this staff talked about them being throughout the entire training camp. I mean, Levi is just, I don't even know if I could use just a bat out of hell. I mean, he is everywhere, relentless motor, crazy energy, pursuing the football, tracking down Jake Browning. I imagine as Jake Browning laid his head to go to sleep on Sunday night, he was probably seeing that long hair just flowing at him constantly. And then Jalen Redmond has just been a revelation from the time he arrived. And again, you got to credit Ryan Grigson of the front office for the initial evaluation of him, and then Brian Flores' willingness to hear Ryan Grigson out to go into, to end up signing a guy who had been in the UFL and who was an undrafted player out of Oklahoma, but he's done nothing but develop and improve. He shows up in from a pass rush perspective. He is evident in the run game. He's physical. He's got wiggle. And to be able to have those two guys in there to take some of the load off of Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave to hopefully stretch their durability out throughout the entire regular season, that is such a massive thing. And the credit goes to the staff too, and Brian Flores, who is often over the first 2 years, just, he's thrown his best guys out there to be willing to adjust a little bit and to have some of these younger guys in there. It's a testament to their ability to garner that trust from Brian Flores, but it's also, good on the staff for, having the long-term view that way. And I as I mentioned, those two guys and Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins and Elijah Williams, I've said this guy's name before, but Marcus Dixon, the D-line coach, got here before last season. And from the time he's arrived, it seems like every one of these guys has gotten better and played really well. So just a younger coach on the staff. I've never talked to Marcus, frankly. Have not spent any one-on-one time with him. But you're consistently blown away by the juice that his group and the fundamentals that his group plays with on a week-to-week basis. So just wanted to mention that. I thought Dallas Turner, going back through the film, played his best game in a Vikings uniform. And it wasn't always the flash, sack, long arm, bend and dip around the tackle, but it was constant pressure. He was physical in the run game. Again, that Bengals trenches, both offensive and defensively, leaves a lot to be desired. But Dallas Turner played a lot on early downs and just felt like he held up in the run. He made quick work of tight ends trying to block him throughout the entire day. That showed up on film. And so just, a great sign to see him hopefully start to come on, and we'll see consistently how much he plays as Andrew Van Ginkel continues to get healthier, hopefully from the concussion that he's working his way back from. But thought Dallas played really, really well, and just wanted to mention that. I'll end it with this. We started a little bit with defense, and I'll end it with defense. But there was this play that I put on social media. If you're not following me, usually the day after games, I'll run through the film and some of the plays that stand out to me, I'll toss over there at Alec_Lewis, typically on X. You can follow us on Instagram at Alec Lewis Show as well. But there was this play early in the game where it's a third down, and the Vikings come out against Jake Browning, and it looks like they're bringing an all-out blitz. And Jake Browning makes a check. And then the Vikings, drop. They've got all of their defenders at the line of scrimmage, essentially. It looks like a punt block. And then, and I'm going through it as I'm talking through this play, but then you've got Theo Jackson dropping from the line of scrimmage, and the cornerbacks pressing up against the receivers. So it looks like you're going from all-out pressure to a man coverage look, which is a fun little change-up. But teams do it a lot. Then, over the course of the pre-snap process, after Jake Browning makes a check, Josh Metellus floats back from the line of scrimmage and towards kind of the middle of the field, looking like he might be like a rat in the hole cover one player. And then, as it continues, he looks like he's about to drop into a cover two look. And then all of a sudden, Harrison Smith floats back from the line of scrimmage, and Jake Browning has to be sitting back there going like, what is this coverage going to be? Is it all out pressure cover 0? Is it cover 1 man coverage across the board? Is it cover 2? Is it, and the Vikings end up playing a coverage that looks like they're playing 2 man on one side and like a cloud coverage on the other side. Makes absolutely no sense. I put on social media and I said, has an NFL defense ever disguised like this pre and post snap? And I haven't gotten a definitive answer to that. I will say J.J. Watt quote tweeted, the post saying that like it was unbelievable coaching by Brian Flores. Darius Butler, who's on the Pat McAfee show and on NFL Matchup on ESPN, he quote tweeted it. I've heard from other coaches in the industry being like, what the heck is going on? And Brian Flores has gotten rightfully a ton of credit for just the craziness of being willing to design a defense where that can be the disguise and the coverages. The one thing I will say, and I just don't ever want it to get lost in what the Vikings do defensively, is to do that type of thing and to do what they do on a weekly basis, you have to have a group of players who have the wherewithal to understand not only the final call of where they need to be, but also how to disguise different coverages, knowing what a quarterback looks for. And that takes a crazy level of just understanding of defense, understanding of what the opposing quarterback looks at. And it's one of those plays and coverages that hopefully is a pretty good reminder to a lot of people who are often, I think over the last couple of years, I've seen it a lot where it's like, is Harrison Smith the player he was? Is he, why does the Vikings, continue to want to bring him back year after year? And it's a level of orchestration on the field that Harrison Smith is capable of as the conductor of the operation that will never show up in the stat sheet, but that if you really peel the layers back, you see it constantly. So just wanted to end there because, and if you haven't seen the play and the disguise, I highly recommend going and check it out on social media because it's almost like a work of art. This Vikings defense, it's almost, sometimes it feels like they just have like a ton of Lego pieces and they can concoct whatever they want to out of them. And it's for humans to actually be able to do that on the field in a 40-second span is it's pretty impressive, pretty mind-blowing, worth mentioning. That'll do it probably for episode 115 of the Alec Lewis Show. It is always a blast to get to recap one of these games, some of these games. And I will say, like this week, you look around the league at different scores, Cleveland, Green Bay, Atlanta, Carolina. It is a great reminder of rarely does any week in this league have any bearing on what's going to happen the next week. So you just have to, as cliche as it is, take them so individually. But for the Vikings, to get that win, to be 2-1, and then now to have this 2-game overseas stretch, these are critical games, knowing what looms after the bye week in Philly and the Chargers, the Ravens, the Lions. The Vikings really need these 2 games. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm making the trip. I'm going flying out on Wednesday. I will be in Dublin. We will record overseas. And we'll be back later this week and next week with podcast from abroad. Can't wait to bring you guys into what the experience is going to be like. I'm going to have a story Wednesday on The Athletic of just what the undertaking is like for people inside this building to prepare for a 10-day trip overseas with a group of players like this, an entire staff, from a marketing perspective, from a nutrition perspective, from an equipment perspective. All the ins and outs of the trip will be in that story over at The Athletic on Wednesday, so please go check that out. If you're new here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can rate and review and follow. We appreciate that. The show is presented by First Resource Bank. It's sponsored by Unreal, the clothing brand that has a limited edition drop on Tuesday, a UK edition, pretty freaking cool hoodie. So go check that out. They're only a limited a number of those, so highly recommend that. And yeah, that'll do it. For episode 115, thank you guys for being here. We will talk to you very, very soon.